thank you both for joining me for this summit webinar on networks and networking. It's great that you guys can be here because I know you're really experienced in this area. I'm just going to start with a couple of housekeeping things for the people joining us. So we are going to start with a conversation between Gemma and Kaleb, who will introduce themselves in a minute, and then we leave time at the end for questions. So there are two options for asking questions. At the bottom of your screen is a button called Q&A, where you can type your question, and then we will read it out and then answer it. Or you can raise your hand and we can turn on your video if you'd like to ask it live. We are recording this session and it goes online afterwards for other people to watch, so just so you know that. Okay. Sorry, someone's just saying there's an issue with the sound. I wonder if I get closer to my microphone whether that might help a little bit. Okay, let's start and see how, yep, okay, that's better. Okay, great, we'll start. Okay, Gemma,
yes.
Would you mind just introducing yourself, telling us a little bit about you and your company, and also a little bit about IETM, which I know that you have been an active member of.
Yeah, so I'm one half of a company called Action Hero. We're based in Bristol in the UK. We make performance and theatre and durational work, installation. Yeah, and we have been going to IETM, which is the Informal European Theatre Meeting, I think it stands for. It's just a network really of people involved in performing arts in Europe, but people from further afield come. They have a meeting, sort of main meeting twice a year, and we've been a member of that network for about 4 or 5 years now.
Brilliant. And then we'll just have an introduction from Kaleb as well. If you could just give us a little introduction to you and your work, and also I think you're going to talk about Assetij as well. So just
right. Hi everyone, my name is Kaleb. I'm a researcher, producer, director, dramaturg, well, basically someone who wears many hats. I am currently the tour manager for Peut-Etre Theatre. It's a company that produces dance theatre for young audiences. In my own capacity, I also manage my own company called Five Stones Theatre with my co-artistic director, Abigail. And we also produce dance and theatre for young audiences. So most of the work that I've done over the years, it's really to do with young audiences, especially the art form of theatre. I've also done international collaborations with various partners around the world, and I also manage a festival for young audiences called the ACE Festival back in Singapore between 2009 to 2014. Yeah, so that's me in a nutshell, and I'm also currently doing research on theatre for young audiences, particularly in Singapore and in creative cities around the world. And I've been also asked to talk a little bit about Assetij, and well, just to give you a little bit of a context about Assetij. Assetij is the International Association for Children and Young People, and they're dedicated to the cultural, artistic, and educational rights for children and young people around the world. And it was established in 1965, so that gives it a very kind of long history to the kind of commitment of TYA practitioners around the world. And I must clarify that even though on the website and in conversations, we use the term theatre, but this is an all-encompassing umbrella that also includes dance, storytelling, circus, and so on and so forth. Yeah.
That's brilliant, thank you. So I think we're going to kind of use these two networks as a kind of case study, as you're both really familiar with them, to talk a little bit about what the benefits and drawbacks of networking events are, how top tips for how we might approach those or other opportunities, and then kind of how they might have fed into your informal networks, so kind of networks that you've created yourself from artist to artist and producers as well, and kind of the benefits of that too. So I wonder if, Gemma, if we could start with you to talk a little bit about kind of over the 4 years of attending IETM. It's one that comes up a lot as an event that theatre makers who are interested in international working should attend. I wonder if, kind of from your perspective, how you find the events, if you found them beneficial, and what any drawbacks that you've experienced yourself.
Yeah, so I really enjoy going to IETM. So it kind of happens like Thursday to Sunday, so sort of a long weekend in a different place in Europe each time. I kind of don't know how to describe it as an event. It's the first time I went to IETM, I found it quite overwhelming because it can be very, very big. So the biggest one I ever went to was, I think, in Amsterdam, and there was 700 or 800 people there. So it was kind of massive and can sometimes feel hard to navigate, but often it's smaller than that. And it's just a kind of, there's a theme always, and there'll be a kind of panels and discussions and working groups around the theme. And then there'll be performances from artists who are local to that city in the evening. That's often the most interesting thing for me, is the artistic program, because I want to go and see work. And I guess, in terms of like, is IETM beneficial? It sort of depends what you mean, I guess, by beneficial. I mean, if you go to a networking meeting or a networking event once, and then think you're going to go and then someone's going to like book a project from you based on going to one meeting one time, that's not how it works. I would say for me, the biggest benefit to going has been, I guess, to maintain relationships with other artists and other programmers and producers over a long period of time who otherwise you might not see face to face, particularly if, maybe we have a new piece available for touring every 2 years, for example, because we make pieces of work quite slowly. And not every piece will be suitable for every venue. So sometimes in terms of like maintaining relationships with colleagues in other countries, it can be hard to do that if you're not seeing people face to face. So I think it's important for that. And then also just to have opportunities to meet other artists who are working in other countries, and also programmers and producers who maybe who don't know our work, or maybe I don't know what they do, to kind of have the opportunity to just sort of be alongside those people for a few days, and be in a context where conversations can happen in an organic way without it feeling really like pitching. I think that's kind of the situation that I think nobody likes, when you feel like you're pitching your work to someone who may or may not be interested. And I think those situations can feel quite icky. So what I find useful about a structured meeting is that it sort of provides a context for which to talk to other people who are really into theatre performing arts, to kind of talk about that. Because, if you've been to see a show in the evening then, and you kind of like are at a networking breakfast the next day, you can always just talk about the show that you saw last night and, talk about that. So, it's really kind of like, I find it beneficial as a way of sort of maintaining a series of relationships with people over a long period of time.
That's great. I mean, I think one of the things that I think is interesting about IETM is that sort of selling in the kind of pitching way is very much frowned upon in that environment. And I think there's also there's an introduction. If you're new to IETM, they do a kind of introduction where they tell you, don't try and sell, because that's not kind of what that event is for. And I really like that, because I find that really icky as well, and it's nice to know that that's kind of not what everybody is there to do, which isn't always the case in the kind of networking events. Do you think there are any kind of drawbacks to that event? Are there anything you think actually it's not doing it for me?
I would say that if you feel, I mean, I think as an event, it doesn't suit everybody. I think if you don't like being in big groups of people where you get, well, you don't have to talk to strangers, but if you don't like being in big groups of people and you don't sort of like chit-chatting with a bunch of people that you don't really know, then you're probably going to have a horrible time. But I quite like that. Like, I like just, you know, meeting new people and chatting and about a sort of shared thing that we have in common. So I would say that if the idea of that sounds horrible to you, then the reality might be horrible as well. And I think it's useful to go for the first time, go with a buddy or go with somebody who's been before. Or what I've done a couple of times is arrange to meet with somebody who I know a little bit. Or somebody like a friend of a friend, or, you know, a kind of, so that at least, you know, on the first day, okay, I know that I'm meeting such and such a person at 2:00. So like worst case scenario, you've got something to sort of structure your time around. But yeah, I don't think it's for everyone. And I think if you're not into, being in big, going to panel discussions about like cultural strategy in Europe or whatever, then perhaps you're going to have a boring time. But I don't know, I'm quite geeky about that stuff, so I normally really enjoy it.
That's cool. I mean, I'm interested that I'm glad that you brought up the program, because I think that I've been to maybe 3 of the 3 plenaries now, and I think that the program can be a little bit hit and miss, and, you know, obviously not everything. It's a big program, not everything is going to be relevant to everybody, and in some places I found it quite academic, which I guess is really, you know, suitable for some people and really interesting, but that I found a little bit alienating, not kind of coming from that perspective. But I really enjoy all of the social aspects, and it's a really nice way to meet colleagues from Europe and from around the world, and have an opportunity over like 4 days to kind of really hang out with them. Nice.
Yeah, I agree. And I think it's also, you know, because they're catering to such a broad spectrum of people across such a, you know, massive range of countries, it can be, it can also just be like a useful reminder. You know, if you're, say, for instance, end up in a sort of a panel for like Baltic circus practitioners, and it kind of can just like remind you that, you know, you're not at this to kind of, not always at the center of your own universe. Do you know what I mean? So to just kind of be reminded of like the really wide range of practice that's happening in Europe and globally, and all the different conversations that are happening kind of on different local levels, it can just be really, really valuable to I just get a sense of all of that stuff, because I think it's really easy to like get stuck into your own like particular art form or like locality specific issues or questions or headaches, and so sometimes it's just it's good to kind of be reminded of like the broad span of stuff that's happening across the rest of Europe and the rest of the world.
So I know this is not the ambition for you attending the event, but have you found that it has kind of yielded relationships or kind of tangible results for you?
Yeah, it definitely has, and I can sort of probably count to a handful of things where we have definitely gotten actual work as a relationship, as a result of relationships that we've made at IETM. But those things are very much you're very much playing the long game with that stuff. I mean, as I say, I think if you go there and think, I'm going to go to this networking event and as a way of trying to book like a 20-day tour for two months time, like that's not going to happen. So it's more about building networks and relationships that kind of, and those things are the foundation of your career and practice, really. So it's more about using ITM as a way to do that stuff rather than it being sort of a means to an end in itself, I would say.
Thank you. That's really great. So I'm just going to ask Kaleb the same sorts of questions. So I haven't attended an Assetij, so it'd be great if you could give us an overview of kind of like how the main meetings work, and how they're kind of structured, and then also kind of what you found has been beneficial about that event, and also any kind of drawbacks that you have experienced yourself.
Sure. Well, I think the Assetij has, well, because it was started in 1965, so things have kind of changed and grown organically over the years, because I think it used to operate in a very hierarchical kind of structure where you needed to be a member in order to attend like the festivals and the network events around the world. But I think what has happened is it has become an open and a very inclusive platform. So the Assetij is not just an event, but it's kind of become an umbrella for different organizations and festivals to happen. In particularly, there are 5. Well, I mean, it's a bit difficult to navigate through the whole Assetij website, but just for just to summarize it for people who do not know much about the Assetij. So it's an international platform, and on this international platform, there are 5 associated networks. So the first one is the Next Generation Program, which is catered mainly for practitioners, producers that are 35 years and below. So it's really to encourage conversations among emerging professionals who are interested about theatre for young audiences. There is also the Playwriting Network, which is Playwright Local Play Global, where it kind of unites playwrights who share the passion for writing about scripts for young audiences. And then there is the Small Size Network, which focuses on early years, and I think it's like 0 to 8 years old. And it kind of unites a lot of European companies and even companies that are not in Europe. And there is also the International Inclusive Arts Network, where it's a relatively new network as well, and it champions artistic activities and practices and expressions for people who might have disability or who have been excluded from the theatrical experiences in the past.
Is there also a showcasing opportunity within the big meetings?
Yes. So how it works with Assetij is there is the artistic gathering that takes place every alternate year, and there is this big World Congress that is going to take place in Tokyo this year in May, where it is, I think it's more of a structural and administrative process where they elect a new president and where you can vote for a new committee. But what happens is with this World Congress, it's usually attached to a kind of international festival. So this year it would be in Japan, in Tokyo, where they are going to have the inaugural Mirai Festival, where there are 25 performances from around the world. So it's not just the Assetij events that have been useful for me over the years, but it's also the small festivals and networking events that in a way have kind of ride on the Assetij platforms that I found useful, because for me personally, I found this Assetij meetings and congress quite overwhelming sometimes, because it is really a kind of international event for a global kind of TYA a global TYA community, whereas there are smaller festivals who might be members of Assetij who have also opened up the festivals to international delegates, and these are the festivals that I found more useful, where you really can kind of make genuine connections between between TYA practitioners and also the producers and the programmers. So for me, I found those particularly more useful in my kind of professional development and capacity building. And I think, just to echo what Gemma said, I mean, the best ways of networking that I found, it's really not to do a sales pitch, right? And it's really, or the best networks are forged through people to people rather than organizations to organizations. So I know sometimes practitioners feel that they hold this responsibility and this baggage of a certain organization that they work for. But I think if you can kind of shift your perspective slightly and just say, hey, look, I'm just there to build relations with other like-minded people who are passionate about, in my case, theatre for young audiences, then that's where it becomes less intimidating. And I always remember what my supervisor had said: it's better to have more quality. Sorry, it's better to have more quality conversations rather than you open more conversations and just leave them hanging. Yeah.
So, if you would you say that being part of Assetij has had outcomes for you? Kind of, have you in the same way as Gemma, has it kind of yielded tangible results?
Yeah, well, in my situation, it's quite different because I must say that I'm not a member of Assetij, even though I'm from Singapore and Singapore is a corresponding member of the center of Assetij. But like I mentioned, because through these festivals that I attend, I get to know more about Assetij and the work that they do. So it doesn't mean that I have to be a member in order to join the larger conversation and the larger cause of creating quality works for young audiences. So in a way, the Assetij has not directly benefited me, but I think indirectly through its initiatives, like for the smaller kind of networks, which I am a member of. For example, I'm a member of the Small Size Network. That has also opened up conversations and opportunities for me to engage with other like-minded practitioners.
I think that's interesting that the membership has kind of many levels, so that you can engage with the part that is most useful to you, and that even if you're not a kind of full member of Assetij, there are still elements of it that you can access. Do you mind me asking, is it very expensive?
Well, well, I mean, expensive is quite relative, and
I guess for a kind of for an independent artist or producer.
Yeah. Well, again, it took me some time to actually understand the bigger structure of Assetij, but I think, like I mentioned, Assetij has grown to become a very inclusive platform. But I also understand, as much as they want to make it free of charge for all the members, but it's inevitable that they need some money to kind of maintain the infrastructures of any kind of networks. So I think to break it down, and I think in the context of the UK, I think there is Assetij UK so-called performing the PYA performance for young audiences, that I think currently the chair for Assetij UK is Kate Cross from The Egg in Bath. So I think how Assetij operates is quite interesting because you do not apply directly to Assetij to become a member. You go through the national center. So for example, in this context, if any kind of UK practitioners are interested, they go to The Egg or go to Kate Cross and say, hey, I'm interested in becoming a member of Assetij. And through that national center, you become an affiliated member of Assetij. But to answer your question about the membership,
I think what I'm really asking is about value for money. So I think finances are an issue. They're a concern for everybody. I don't know many artists who have loads of money or producers. So thinking about whether there is a kind of return on investment for your membership money.
As a guideline, I think for Assetij UK, it's £70 a year for a company and 25 for individual. I might be wrong, but please check the website. And I think for people for artists who do not have an Assetij national center in their own country, they can join as individual members. And I think it ranges between $35 to $50 for an individual membership. But that being said, if an artist has expresses any kind of financial difficulty, Assetij is always there to kind of support them financially. And I know of some artists who are being supported by Assetij, and the membership is waived in a way.
Wow, that's amazing. Gemma, for IETM, I'm won't ask about the cost, but I know that there is a scaling of cost depending on your turnover.
Yeah.
But obviously then on top of that you have your travel and accommodation to where that event is being held. I know that the Action Hero is now an NPO, but before that, did you feel like it was something that you could and should be finding the money for? Did you feel like it was worth doing that?
I thought it was worth it, yeah. And yeah, it's true that, I mean, the membership's not loads. I think the lowest tier is like €100 for the year, so it's not expensive. But yeah, then you have to pay to get to the place, and then you have to stay somewhere, so the cost can add up easily. But for me, it felt like it was really worth it. So we were already doing a lot of international touring before we became members, but it felt like it was worth it as a way to maintain relationships with international programmers, for us to also for the company to kind of maintain visibility as well. It felt like that was really important, to just kind of keep like, I agree with what Kaleb said, like to keep human contacts with people. I think you can't really have a relationship with an institution as such, but you can have a relationship with a person, and they become your friend, you know. And so like, people move between organizations all the time, and it's hard to kind of, I mean, you can obviously send people emails to say, hi, just wanted to say hello, this is what I'm doing. But you know, if you can actually go and meet up with those people and have a drink or have a coffee or get lunch, or then those things it's really, really worth it. So for me, I think once the company was doing quite well and we were doing quite a lot of touring, even though I knew that it would cost us money to go to these networking events, I thought that it was worth the investment in that kind of long-term, the long-term of the company. I think, because I don't think there's really any other way to maintain relationships with people other than, you know, through formal or informal networks. I mean, you have to be able to see people. So I think it's worth doing that, I think.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you. I think that's really useful insight into it, because while funding is available for some events and for certain groups of people and stuff, it's not going to be the case for everybody. So I think it's useful to know that it kind of aligned with your priorities, and that's a reason for investing. I want to talk a little bit about informal networks, and we kind of like touched on that. So and Gemma, you just mentioned about kind of informal networks. Have you how do you kind of maintain those outside of those networking events? And like, you've met people through going to IETM or through other aspects that have become kind of your informal network? So I'm interested, I think, in finding out kind of how you keep in touch with those people outside of the face-to-face, but also how you might have helped each other in your work as well. Is that all right, Gemma?
Yeah. Sorry,
yeah,
I didn't know if it was. I didn't know if you were directly asking me. I didn't want to interrupt if it was directed to Kaleb. Yeah, I think informal networks are really important, and I think that they just kind of, sometimes those things are just organic. So I think because Action Hero is mostly a touring company, so it means that we're often, when we're presenting work in different festivals, it will often happen that we present work in a festival with an artist who we know from seeing their work, or we've presented with them in a festival before. So I think there's also those, you know, artists that are kind of on the same circuit as you, I guess, so I always try to stay in touch with those people, and then I guess, like, I'm involved in and have been involved in a lot of artist led informal networks over the years, mostly to do with being involved in artist-led spaces and stuff. So quite often, if we go to another country or whatever, we'll often look up or try to get in touch with the artist-led projects that are happening in those places, just because it's sort of a thing that I'm really interested in. And so then I really enjoy saying to people like, oh, I met this person in this country, you should get in touch with them. And because people have done it for me before, where they've said, oh, you're going to Spain, and I'll put you in touch with this person. And then it's nice to kind of like meet up with an artist who you didn't know before, and you know, have a sort of a guide to the city. Those things are always really nice. But yeah, so I think it's also about sharing contacts with people who you meet. And then I don't know that there's any sort of more formal things than that I do, but it's just about kind of trying to stay in touch with people. And you can, you know, through social media and stuff, you can do that, but often there's not loads of, I'm sure Kaleb will say the same, but often if, you know, the particular sphere that you're working in, there's not loads of people who are doing it, so you tend to see the same people, so in that sense it's quite easy to stay in touch.
I think that's really interesting what you were saying about kind of generosity as well, that you've recommended artists that you know, and that then they in turn recommend you. You know, that has a lot of sway. If you've been recommended to somebody, that's an endorsement, and it's a great way to kind of get a foot in the door. Do you ever kind of ask people for introductions?
Yeah, we do. We do that if with programmers and things, if we have presented a piece of work somewhere and we've really got on really well with the producer or the programmer, and I know that they've really enjoyed our work being there, and we've thought that the place where they're working is really amazing, then we will sometimes ask that programmer for if they have any recommendations of people to contact, or if they can put us in touch with colleagues who might be interested in a piece of work. And I always find that so valuable, and because I think often if you're from an artist perspective, if you've got a project that you think would be amazing in a certain festival or a certain venue, but you just kind of cold call them, basically, like a cold email doesn't often yield results. Sometimes it does, but not often. Whereas I know that a personal recommendation from a colleague, from a programmer colleague, is worth loads more than me just getting in touch, you know, cold. So I think if I have a good relationship with a programmer, then I often will ask them to make a recommendation, or to put me in touch at least. I think those things are really valuable. I mean, I wouldn't do it all the time, just random, because it can feel a bit like, I don't know, not appropriate always. But if I feel like, you know, it would be, we have a good relationship with that person, or we've known them for a long time, then, and I know that they trust me and trust our work, then then I think people are often happy to do that as well, because, you know, everybody, if they really like the work and they're excited to share it, then that's obviously an amazing thing if you can have somebody who's advocating for you. And then I would also advocate for those organizations as well, and say, you know, to artist colleagues, say, oh my God, we went to this festival and we had the most incredible time and the program was brilliant and you should definitely check it out. I think I do that often, and people definitely do it for us.
And it's also seems like a really good way to expand your knowledge of arts organisations and venues within different places. You know, because from Googling, you can't always find out kind of what is the right space for your work, or kind of like who are the right people to be talking to. But somebody who's living and working in that place has, you know, a kind of wealth of knowledge that you can share the same thing about the region that you're knowledgeable about.
Yeah, definitely. And I think often, you know, especially if you're making work that's a bit more unusual, or work that kind of shifts between form like we do, sometimes it's hard to know, where would be the best place for this particular piece of work, and it's quite unusual, or it needs quite a specific context. And then put colleagues in other countries who are working in those contexts, they'll have much better links than we do, or they might have a kind of more in-depth knowledge. And so I think often people are really up for sharing that knowledge and being part of those conversations, because when it works out, it benefits everybody. So I always find that a really useful approach.
Brilliant. Would you agree, Kaleb? Do you use your kind of informal networks?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Gemma that face to face it's the best way to network. But I think as the world is getting kind of smaller as well, and with the advancement in technology, it has made networks and networking more readily accessible. And I just want to give you an example of the Asian TYA network. So this was it's a relatively new network that started in 2016, and it was supported by the Japan Asia Center, the Japan Foundation Asia Center, as well as ACO Okinawa. So one of the main aim was to investigate the state of Southeast Asia TYA, because that seemed to be an area that has been kind of neglected in the bigger kind of conversation about works for young audiences. So what has been interesting is that we have been finding new ways to maintain the networking, and also to include people who might have been left out in these kind of activities. And just to echo what Gemma said, because it's true. I mean, it's great to have face-to-face kind of interactions, but visiting a festival with the flights, with the accommodation, sometimes it does add up, and not all artists or producers can afford to attend such festivals. So with this network, we were trying to find ways that can kind of decentralize this idea of meeting in one spot and having like a discussion or a festival. And I think it's more particular to Southeast Asia, because there is often a lack of funding structure, there are lack of funding. So it's quite a unique context in a way. And what we have found, or what we have been experimenting with, is using new technologies like Zoom, like Facebook. So it doesn't necessarily mean that everybody has to gather at a particular festival. But we have tried to make the network more horizontal. So in a way, there isn't a particular kind of hierarchy of who's the president, who's the vice president, when is the next festival. So on our website, what we have done is we have made it, we have shared different various events, and people are welcome to kind of attend. But what we have tried to do is also to have kind of Zoom meetings at each of these festivals. So other practitioners in other parts of the world, not necessarily Southeast Asia, can also kind of listen in and to see what are some of the developments. So I think kind of decentralizing it away from festivals and a kind of a main center also kind of opens up the conversation slightly. And I think it also takes the pressure off the artist to kind of raise funds or to kind of clear the schedule to make it for just one specific meeting. And I think that has been quite healthy, especially for Southeast Asia. And also just to pick up on what Gemma said, I think with social media, I mean, with networking, just make use of it, because I found out that, with Facebook, sometimes it is good to kind of maintain relationships after the first meeting or the second meeting. And for me, it's through this Facebook kind of interactions that kind of foster and strengthen those relationships. And the best friends I've made actually are through Facebook, and we kind of keep in touch after these meetings. And what I was also going to say was, it's to do with that idea of generosity. And I must say that with networking, it is about the art of listening as well as speaking as well. And I think more importantly, it's always to keep a keen ear on what people are saying, and again, to ditch that sales pitch. And and I think once you understand the person for who or she is, I think it kind of breaks. It shifts your mindset about networking for an agenda.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's really interesting. Lots of things that you said there were really interesting. Particularly thinking about kind of different ways in which people can get together through sort of new technologies and stuff as we all become more conscious about how much we travel, particularly kind of, you know, those people who are working internationally. If you're also touring and then also visiting networks, you know, there's a lot of international travel, which obviously has an impact, but also that it opens up kind of accessibility in terms of like the finances and schedule as well. So I think that, yeah, that's really interesting. And also just what you were both saying about generosity, that, you know, that's how you don't have to be in competition with other people. You know, actually, if you're generous, then it makes everything better, which I really like. Okay, I think we're probably going to go for some questions. If anybody would like to ask some questions of Gemma and Kaleb, then please pop those into the Q&A now. We can have a look at that while we're just waiting for those to flood in. I'm just going to ask you what your top tips are, Gemma and Kaleb, for approaching networking, as perhaps as somebody like who, I'm sure you aren't, but I am a little bit socially awkward. So what advice could you give me for throwing myself into a networking
I would say best thing you can I would say the best thing you can do is to try not to call it networking. Just try to call it something else. Because I think lots of people say, and I kind of agree with them. They think, oh God, I hate networking. It's horrible. Because I don't know, if you kind of like frame it to yourself of like, okay, I've got to go and like schmooze the room, then that's a horrible thing to think. But if you just think, oh, this so exciting, it's a whole room full of people who all really care about the same thing that I do, and I'm going to go and just like say hi to a bunch of friends who I haven't seen for ages because they live really far away from me, and you know, the opportunity to make some new friends, then for me suddenly that feels like a really fun thing to do, and it just kind of takes the pressure off. So I would say try to call it something else in your head as the first rule.
Good tip.
Yeah, and my second tip would be to take a friend with you, or arrange to meet somebody there, so that you know, okay, so I know that I'm gonna be with this person, or know that I'm gonna meet up with someone, so that you've kind of got a bit of a point of focus. And then my third top tip would be, if you're ever in, I do it quite often, if I'm in one of those, a big room where it's like there's a breakfast, or there's it's like drinks time, or I don't know, and there's just sort of load of people standing around in a room talking, you quite often have those things where I'm like, oh, I've forgotten somehow I have no one to talk to, what am I going to do? I just do a circuit of the room. Just kind of walk around the room, just being sort of, you know, with an open and friendly face. And probably, I don't know, 50% of the time you'll see somebody you know, or like, you know, just chat to someone over a canapé or something like that. So I normally, sometimes when I'm thinking, oh God, I'm going to leave because I'm not happy, you know, I'm not talking to anyone or having a very good time, I think, okay, I'm just going to like do a little lap of the room. And often then you'll bump into some person or a few people to talk to. So those are my top tips.
They're great, thank you. Okay, Kaleb, any top tips?
Well, for me, it's always do your homework before any of these, networking events. And I think for me, for the kind of TYA festivals, what happens is the festivals usually send out a delegates list in advance. So rather than, you know, trying to go in and like what Gemma said, like you try and smooth the room. I think for me, what's important is to identify like some people that you are really want to meet, because like, for example, in festivals, sometimes not all of them are there for the entire period. So what I do is I usually either drop them a Facebook message or an email, like, hey, I'm interested in meeting you. Can we meet up for a coffee or just a chat between like 2 to 3 p.m. on a Tuesday. And I think on the receiving end as well, when I receive those emails from other delegates, I feel an instant connection with them. And I think just narrowing down who you want to meet, in a way kind of takes the pressure off again, like who's who in the room. And also sometimes I understand that, you might want to meet someone and you might not know who this person is. And I think the best way would actually just to ask the festival director or the festival programmer to kind of link you guys up. My second tip is I can't stress again that, it's important to have quality conversations. I remember my first time attending the, the performing arts market in Australia. That was so overwhelming because I remember it was a table full of people and we had 2 minutes of like a speed dating kind of sales pitch. So at the end of the session, I was so overwhelmed and I had this whole stack of business cards, but I couldn't remember what people were saying. So, to escape the room, I went down to the bar, just grab a drink, just to like chill for a bit. And I think other people felt the same and they were there as well. And we soon started just to talk about life, not just, and less about the work that we were doing. And I think from there, it kind of fostered that relationship with that person. So I think it's to focus on the quality of the conversations and not feel the pressure to kind of achieve a certain agenda. And I think the last one is really time. The best relationships are built through time. And I've been friends and partners with some of these amazing programmers and artists, and it has taken me like 10 over years. And like what Gemma mentioned, these people might move from organizations to organizations, but once you foster that relationship or friendship with them, it kind of breaks the barriers of organizational structures when you just understand the person's interest and passion for that particular subject. Yeah.
Brilliant. There's some excellent tips there. Thank you. We've had one question about kind of social media platforms. So Facebook came up a couple of times for both of you, but is that because that's your preferred social media platform, or is that because that's the best one that you found for kind of keeping in touch with people?
You go, Kaleb.
Yeah, for me, I think Facebook appeals to a certain demographic without revealing my age, but I think with the slightly younger artists, I realized that Facebook is not the best way to kind of connect with them. And in fact, Instagram seems to be the way to go with the younger generation. But I think people of like late 20s to early 40s, or even like to early 50s, I would say, still rely a lot on Facebook. And sometimes, like for me, I try to keep Facebook purely professional for work, even though occasionally I do post a little bit of like personal stuff, just to engage with the audience. But I think Facebook has been a very good platform because in a way you get to create like groups on like Facebook Messenger, and sometimes these groups are there, and whenever I have an event or someone else has an event, they just pop it there, and we kind of reconnect again. And I think, but on another platform, which I think it's for more individual, if you want to just promote your own events, I think Twitter is a way to go as well, because I think of how the algorithm works. It kind of it reaches out to audiences very quickly. So I would recommend just continue engaging with social media, even though I know some people are very against it. But yeah, I think with emails, it's very different from emails. I mean that was my point, because with emails there is that pressure to kind of create a very kind of formal tone to it, and you can't really engage with a wider kind of audience. And I think more so in the field of theatre for young audiences, people are more playful, more young at heart, more generous. So engaging on more informal kind of platforms seem to work better with them.
We have well, probably not all of the platforms, because there's probably, I think there's like platforms that teenagers use that I'm not on, but we have Facebook and Instagram and Twitter, so we kind of maintain all of them, and we do different things on different platforms. And I don't have any personal social media presence at all. So yeah, my entire social media presence is kind of through the company. Yeah, so we just use them for different things. I don't use Facebook that much, actually. I mean, we sort of maintain it, but yeah, I try to just I try to keep social media for work stuff. Yeah, they're useful for different stuff, and I think different projects suit different types of social media. So the most recent project we did was a project where we were traveling through Europe in a caravan, and we did a lot of stuff on Instagram for that because it was so visual and it just kind of made much more sense. And but yeah, so I think it's just useful to kind of have a social media presence on as many things as possible. But I don't know, also I would say don't kind of get stressed out and bogged down with it, because it can perhaps end up taking over your life.
Thank you. So we've got one more question. This is another kind of top tip from you guys about kind of what is the best way that you find to kind of introduce yourself to a stranger? Yeah.
Gemma, you can take this one.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of, there's no nice way. I don't know, like, I sometimes just try not to and just sort of end up in a conversation. I mean, that's my preferred way, is that you just kind of end up in a conversation with someone. And sometimes you don't necessarily know who that person is until, the next time you see them in a meeting. Or try to get someone to introduce you. Sometimes that's the best way. But yeah, I think it sometimes can be a bit stressful if you can just sort of go up to someone and say, "Hi, my name's Gemma." I don't know. I don't really know how to do that. I've seen other people do it, and they're really good at it. Also, how do you leave a conversation? Sometimes I don't know how to do that. Of like, okay, I'm gonna go now. I don't know. It's like somehow weird. I don't know. Yeah, I always try to get someone else to introduce you, or just kind of try and take a more sort of organic approach. I don't know if I've got a perfect answer for that. Maybe Kaleb has a special way.
No, I agree with you completely. I mean, I can be very socially awkward as well, and like I mentioned, like for me, what would be interesting what's useful for me, it's really just to send the person an email that send the person that I want to meet an email, and in that, you already kind of give context of who you are and what you do, and so you avoid that kind of face-to-face formal introduction, I would say, and you can just chat about the festival, the shows that you have watched, or a symposium that you have just attended. So I think it, in a way, that again takes the pressure off the kind of very formal introduction. Yeah, but like yourself, I really do not know how to exit conversations as well. I mean, especially in a room full of people, and like you spot someone in the distance, it's like, oh wait, I have to say hi to him or her, and like, how do I excuse myself from these conversations? But what I found useful, it's then to kind of to introduce this person that I'm talking to the person that I want to talk to, and so that kind of grows the social circle. And I think once you have a kind of safety in numbers scenario, it kind of takes the pressure off everyone, and after that you just go out for a meal, or you go out for drinks. So I think that has been my strategy that I'm still testing out, but so far it's been working. Yeah.
Oh, brilliant! Thank you very much, both. We haven't got any more questions, so unless anybody would like to ask a last minute question. Nope. I'm going to round up and say thank you so much, Gemma and Kaleb, for joining us and for sharing all of your amazing knowledge. It's been really great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
See you later.
Bye.
Bye.